Wayne, Daron, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Likewise, it's good to have you back. We said we was going to have you back, and now we have you back. So we kept our word.
Good to be back.
Yeah, welcome.
So guys, this topic today, this is something that I know I deal with on a frequent basis, and I know Jim's dealing with on a frequent basis. Jim, you want to kind of just go over a little bit what you're dealing with right now, and then we'll kind of lead into some back-to-back with us.
Yeah, sure. So for those who aren't familiar with my situation, I haven't seen my children in 18 months. And in that time period and the time that preceded, the court hearing in September of 2021, my ex-wife had implemented a campaign of parental alienation. And, so for me, I've experienced alienation firsthand for the past 3 years. And there's some very extreme examples that I can present, and I'll give you probably one of the most extreme is, so my youngest daughter, I have 3 children, and my youngest daughter, it was about 3 weeks before her 9th birthday. And she had threatened to hurt herself with a knife, commit suicide, while under my ex-wife's care. So my ex-wife didn't tell me about my daughter and what she threatened. I found out about a week and a half later through my attorney. And I also found out that my ex-wife enrolled my daughter in counseling with the battered women's shelter to a counselor who was, not accredited in child therapy in any way. And then, to make matters worse, on her birthday, I drove over to my ex-wife's house with my son Ryan and my daughter Tabitha to visit Samantha. And my ex-wife would not open the door, would not allow the children to see her siblings, would not allow my daughter to see me. And that right there is kind of, the most extreme case of parental alienation that I can, present. But this is something that has been manifesting and happening for the past 2 years. And so I've taken a lot of time to do some research and analysis to understand, parental alienation from a broader perspective and understand the nuances and the micro aspects. So hopefully we can cover all of those things in our discussion today.
That's a good topic because there's like you said, a lot of nuances to it and a lot of kind of micro topics that come up when you're dealing with it, and it's so insidious that it's hard to notice at first. It's almost like it's been happening for a little while before anyone really catches wind of what's going on. Then it's almost too late for those kids because the damage has been done, and now it's a matter of repairing that. And that's a very difficult thing to deal with. And that's the part of my story that I'll offer is I had a very extreme case of parental alienation as well. When I was 17, I had a child with a staff member at a group home, and she was 31 years old and didn't want me to be in that kid's life. But I wanted to do the right thing and be there for my son because I grew up without a dad. So I wanted to do what I could, but the second that me and her broke up, she didn't want me to see the kid anymore. So I spent 3.5 years raising that kid from day one. And then the day that we broke up, she didn't want me to be his dad anymore, but he was my son, like 100%. We had a DNA test that was my son. And I said, like, why? And she's like, because you're a piece of garbage. And I said, but I wasn't for the last 3 years that we were together. How all of a sudden am I this piece of garbage? And she's like, you just started, you're never going to see him ever again. So at 17 years old, well, this was now, I was 20. I took her to court for custody and access to my son because she was just playing games all over the place. She was controlling him. She wouldn't let me see him. She would plan visits and then not show up. And then I was living 2 hours out of town. So I was taking the Greyhound to come and see my son for a 2-hour visit. So I would take the bus for 2 hours, I'd spend $70 on the bus ticket, come here, meet him at the mall, spend 2 hours with him, get back on the Greyhound and go home. And I did that willingly as many times a month as they would let me see him. Until all of a sudden she started playing these games, and it was just like it just started ramping up more and more and more. So I asked the courts for supervised visits, because that's pretty much the only thing you can really do to prove, is have a professional eyeball everything and say, yeah, no, this is clearly what's going on. So we had supervised visit, and the first one went great. Like, my son was uncomfortable at first when he first got out of the car, kind of, was a little bit hesitant to play, which is normal. And we just, were comfortable, and I brought some toys and some books that he had at my house. And I just sat down and started reading, and he slowly came closer and closer and closer. By the end of the second book, he was sitting on my lap and brushing my beard, being like, I missed you, Dad, and it was all written down and documented by the supervisor, and we had a great visit. And then Mom called 45 minutes into the visit and said, we need to end it. I need to take Calvin to go somewhere else. But the supervisor had noticed that she was sitting down the street watching with binoculars in her car. So she watched everything happen and was pissed off at my son because he was actually having fun and enjoying time with his dad. So she came and stormed the visit. So she called first, and then when the lady said, no, this visit's going okay, you can go do your thing, whatever emergency you need to deal with, and me and Chris will stay with Calvin, and you can come afterwards, and Chris will just get an extended visit. That's okay. Go deal with your emergency. We'll handle Calvin. And she said, no, I'm coming to get him right now. And she was at the park within 30 seconds. So she was just sitting right down the street watching everything. And then, so this was all documented by the supervisor, which if you listen to that story, it's very clear what's going on. Mother is being aggressive. We went to court after that supervised visit. The judge gave me a little bit more access and a little bit more time, and again, extended our visits to get a little bit more. On the very next visit, my son was a completely different kid. Completely different child when he got out of that car. So from that visit to this one, the entire time Mom was saying bad things about me and saying how much how terrible his life would be with me and all this. So when my son finally did show up, he was so uncomfortable that he didn't want to have the visit, and he actually asked for the visit to end about 4 minutes in. So again, spent 2 hours on the bus, $140 each way. Well, 2 ways to get there and back for a 4-minute visit. And that's when it all started. It ramped up from there so heavy and so fast that I couldn't even catch my breath to understand what I was dealing with. And then next thing I knew, I was 6 years into a court case. I'd seen my son 5 times. And now I was taking his mother's husband to court for custody and access to my son because she died in a car accident. When I went to court, I had I think I said to you guys earlier, 12 minutes in court. And that was it. That's all it took for them to give my son to his grandparents. And I have never seen him again from that day forward. That was 12 years ago. And there's nothing I can do because they gave the grandparents sole custody. So unless the grandparents want me to be in his life, I can't be in his life. And they don't want me in his life because I'm a huge embarrassment on their family because Mom cheated on her husband with a kid. So it's very embarrassing for them, and I understand where they're coming from. But 6 years with a child for nothing was the most devastating thing that I ever had to deal with. And I did that all while I was coming off of getting out of the streets. So it fucked me up for the longest period of time because that's just detrimental, man. Completely detrimental.
Hey, Chris, there's a lot of things that you talked about that we could, kind of pull the thread on, everything from, how it impacts, the children, how it impacts the individuals, the court system, how it's recognized or it's not recognized. And, Wayne or Daron, kind of weigh in on your thoughts, and then I can go ahead and tell you very, from a very high level perspective down to getting into the weeds on all of the different parts of parental alienation that I've experienced personally and done research on. So I'll kick it over to Wayne and Daron, and then let me know if you have any questions for me.
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask you, Jim, when did you first notice the relationship between your kids? When did you first notice like it was a strain between them, between the, your kids from when you went to the parental alienation?
So what happened was I had custody of Ryan and Tabitha, the older my older children, and my ex-wife, she kept my youngest daughter for herself. So I saw the parental alienation occurring with my daughter, my youngest daughter, almost immediately, and that was a tragedy because having her separated from her siblings and separated from me had an impact on her. Hence, why she threatened to hurt herself with a knife and commit suicide. But then the bonds that I have with my older children, especially my daughter Tabitha, are very strong. And no matter what my ex-wife tried to do to erode those bonds, she couldn't. And I think it frustrates my ex-wife. And, so how does this manifest and how have I seen it? I've seen it more with the therapist and my ex-wife and their influence and over one specific topic. And it's, we had a Skype call and out of nowhere, my daughter said, "Well, Dad, you were abusive." And as a parent, hearing your child say you're abusive, it really tears your heart apart. And I said, "Okay, let's pull this apart. Let's talk about this. How was I abusive?" "Well, you hit me with the strap." And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." I said, "I hit Ryan with the strap. I hit you with the strap. I hit Samantha with the strap. When did I hit you with the strap?" And they said, "Well, when we did things wrong." And I said, "Was I mad when I did it? Was it in a way that I was angry? Did I did it in a way that was abusive?" And they're like, "No." And I said, "How was it done?" "Well, you explained to us what we did wrong. You told us you're going to get the strap. We got the strap and it was over." So when we talk about states like Virginia, where corporal punishment, is allowed and then we talk and we want to, criticize people. We were having a conversation earlier. What's your tone and your inflection when you talk to your child and you have some person saying, "Oh, you're abusing your child"? I used to walk into, the daycare center when my kids were 3, 4, 5 years old. And I go, "All right, pecker heads, get over here." And all three of my kids, their heads would pop up and they'd come running to me. And I would have people criticize me. So going back to your original question, the alienation is the most severe with my youngest daughter because my ex-wife's influence on her was most extreme. With regard to the older children, my son is just not mature enough to really understand. And when my ex-wife or her parents or her friends say stuff, and I have this documented where, my ex-wife texts are being read by my daughter and she tells me these things. I have all of these things documented and it's pretty bad. But my kids are resilient. They know that I love them and they're really, not affected. And give me 1 second, I want to grab something. I got a Father's Day card. It was last month, and my daughter wrote, "Hi, Dad, I miss you so much. I love you so much, and I wish I could see you for Father's Day. Have fun with Derpy. Derpy's our dog, and have an amazing Father's Day. Love, Tabitha." So how, as a mother, can you have your daughter read? Because I know my ex-wife read this because she reads everything before she sends it out. How is you, as a parent, as a mother, can read this and not allow your daughter to see their father? And then my son just wrote his name, Ryan. And then my youngest daughter writes, "You are the best dad." And, this is where I'll go back to you, Chris. At what point does a parent in their vindictiveness, in their anger, in their hate, and their malice towards their ex supersede the best interest of the children or the welfare of the children or the children's happiness? How disgusting of a person do you have to be to hate an individual so much that you're willing to compromise your child's happiness or try to brainwash your child into believing that their parent, the other parent, is a mean person that has, doesn't love them. So with that, I'll stop and love to hear, Wayne, what you think.
So, man, let me tell you, you guys are so strong to go through this. Like, I don't know if you hear, but my kids are running around. I'm with my kids every day. And Chris, me and him, we've doing the show, we've talked about it. But like, Jim, I watch all of your videos, all right, on my personal channel, and I comment because like it almost brings me to tears to watch the way that she ends the Skype calls. Like you're sitting there and you're trying your heart. The one where you were explaining something to your daughter. Your 3 kids were there, and your daughter there was something with the swimming, right? Was it swimming she does?
Yeah.
Swimming, and like the one kid was like, "Oh, you're only better than me," or something like that, and you sent the other kids away, and you did that because they're too young to understand what she's going through, and they don't need to hear that. And then you look at the comments, and they're like, "Well, you're such a bad dad. Why would you just cut her off and send the kids away?" And it's like they don't understand the role of the father. And I try so hard to be a good father, and the fact that people are doing that, and that the mom is keeping you away, but you're trying so hard to be there for them the little bit that you can. And that's all I got to say, man. It's just you guys are just so strong, and I really hope that this court case, that the motion that you filed goes through, and you're able to see them. Because I couldn't imagine waking up and not seeing my kids, and you guys have to live through it. And I'm just grateful that you guys are sharing your stories. And even in our Discord, we have other guys who are going through the same thing, and it's just, there's so many people who are out there and they just don't know how to express it or talk about it. So hopefully they get to see this and feel stronger knowing that they're not alone.
You brought up a really good point there. There's a stat that I pulled up here this morning, and it's over 43% of these parental alienation cases are the mothers talking shit about the dads for no reason other than they wanted to leave. And it's crazy, man. Like there's a study, I'll pull up my notes here, just give me 1 second. So it's Dr. Gardner. I don't know exactly where he was studying, but he conducted a study of 99 children from 52 different families. He had previously diagnosed with PAS, Parental Alienation Syndrome. Reporting the results in his 2001 text on therapeutic interventions for his population, he concluded the court chose to either restrict the children's access to the alienator or change custody with 22 of the children. This follow-up work found a significant reduction in or even elimination of PAS symptomology in all 22 of these cases. So in these cases, like me and Jim are dealing with right now, where the kids are taken from the alienator and placed with the other parent, these children thrive. They learn to love properly. They learn to grow up healthy, loving relationships. And the kids that don't suffer immensely. So it says, in these 77 cases, so the other cases, out of the 77 cases where the court chose not to reduce custody, access, or transfer custody, there was an increase in PAS symptomology in 70 cases. Out of 77, 90.9%. That's staggering. So this is happening in some other things that I found in over 25% of custody cases, and there's 750,000 active custody cases in the US right now. 25% of those are dealing with PAS.
Hey, Chris, this is kind of what we spoke about earlier. So parental alienation right now is kind of like this new vogue, psychoanalysis. It's really not a lot of information out there, and it's almost becoming a cottage industry, like a green field where you have a lot of research that's starting to happen. You don't have a lot of, clinical analysis that you can rely upon, and you have certain people who have become experts, and a lot of people who are now exploiting this, and they see it as an opportunity to make money, just like therapists do and lawyers do. And what we're not seeing is how the impact of parental alienation, what the impact of parental alienation is on the children in the long term. And for the short term, you can see that. And here's the other problem. Some states don't recognize parental alienation as abuse. So for my case, I document over 35 Skype calls ended, over 6 hours of time separated from my children. And I bring this to CPS along with the Skype call logs, along with the video and audio recordings and everything that I post. And CPS says, sorry, we don't recognize this as child abuse. And then, as I read to you earlier, if you read the statutes for child abuse in Virginia, parental alienation falls within those parameters and should be considered child abuse, which is why I put it in my motion that my ex-wife is knowingly and willingly conducting child abuse. But now we go back to the problem where you have a judge who may not understand parental alienation, or his interpretation of the rules of parental alienation or child abuse don't convey with his own personal beliefs or worldviews. And then you have to go and look at case law, deeds versus deeds. You have to go look at other precedents that have been set. So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to talk about it in a way, if you approach this from a legal perspective, make sure that you have all your ducks in a line. But if you're just trying to fight the other parent, you're losing. You can't win when they have all the control. The only thing I can do is be the best dad I can be. Tell them I love them, tell them I miss them, hope that the bonds that I built with them are not being torn apart, and look towards the future. And I'll tell you, when the kids are back in my life, not if, I will talk to them as a parent, but I will not disparage my ex-wife. I will not say anything bad about what she did. I will say, hey, your mom's going through some things she's got to figure out. I don't know why she did what she did. I'm just happy that you're back in my life. Because a lot of times you'll see the alienator, when the children go back, you superimpose that behavior and they become alienated. They're trying to alienate the other parent because of their anger or hate or malice towards what has been done to them. And you just got to be the bigger person. So
A really good point, Jim. It's something I've experienced personally, the want to fucking do it back. And it's a ego thing, right? Like you have to check your fucking ego there, because you want to attack back, and it's not the right thing. It's just not the right thing to do. You have to love your kids. You have to support their relationship with the other parent. You have to be the example that you want them to see at the other house, right?
Yeah.
So if you can example that for them as often as possible, good on you. But if you're gonna start bad mouthing and doing the same thing, it's a very slippery slope, because once you deal with the parental alienation, it's very hard not to alienate back. You have to check into that, and that's where studying and learning about what the fuck you're dealing with is really important. Because if you're a good parent and you read the kind of effects that happen to these kids and you see what happens to these kids, there's no way that you can perform these kind of behaviors. Like, you have to fucking check your ego, and you have to understand that you're not in the right place if you're still thinking egotistically or even vindictively against your ex. You can't do that. It's betterment of the children, always, 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 right? So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is like big eye opener. She just tried to take me to court for full custody while she's doing this kind of stuff to the kids. And now I'm starting to think maybe the custody needs to flip the other way. But I'm also making sure that I'm not just lashing out and snapping back at her.
I was going to ask you, Jim, I know this is going to sound like a stupid question, but I was going to ask you, have you tried to talk to Liz personally, one-on-one, without the kids involved?
I've sent in the emotion, I've sent over 100 emails dealing with the situation, asking to co-parent, asking to come to resolution with the Skype calls, asking her for, hey, Liz, do me a favor. Can you tell me what topics you don't want me to discuss? Or can you do me a favor if there's a topic that I'm speaking about and you feel that it's inappropriate, instead of hanging up the Skype call, can you say, hey, Jim, I would prefer if you don't talk about this in front of the children, move to a different topic. I've asked, yeah, I've done everything in my power. And this is a really effed up thing. When I spoke with her therapist, the person who did the psychological evaluation of her, because we shared the same evaluator, I asked him, hey, Dr. Lane, and this was before, this is when I still had custody of the kids. Hey, Dr. Lane, are we ever going to get to a point where I can say, hey, Liz, I'm taking the kids on vacation. We're going skiing. You know, I have enough money for airline tickets. I'd be, you know, it'd be great if you went. He looked at me and unequivocally said, she will never do that. I can't talk about her mental health issues or anything like that, because I could be in contempt or anything like that. But she has some things she needs to work through from her childhood and, you know, and what she's doing right now. And it's unfortunate because I mean, if she came to me tomorrow and said, hey, Jim, I fucked up, you know, we need to do this, I'd be like, let's do it. What do we got to do? You name it. I'll do backflips. I'll crawl through broken glass. You tell me what I got to do. I'll do it. But there has been no willingness to co-parent, no willingness to find resolution, because the minute the kids come back into my life and she's alone, she's destroyed. It destroys her worldview. It destroys the whole you know, worldview that she's created. Single mom, struggling, abusive, this and that, and it destroys it. And the kids want to be with me, and that's why she's fighting so hard, because once they're back in my life, it's going to destroy her.
And I want to ask you another question too. Do the kids, because I know your kids are old enough to understand what's going on, obviously. Samantha, obviously. But do you think that they understand that your ex-wife is like brainwashing them in a way, or do you
Let's not
think
say
they understand
brainwash.
that?
Yeah, let me answer it like this. So when I was out the other night, I went to go see The Sound of Freedom. I walked into the restaurant. I was on a date. My date wasn't there. I walked into the restaurant and I saw one of my ex-wife's friends. We used to all be friends. And then once we got divorced, she didn't, you know, associate with me. She walked up to me and said, can I speak to you for a minute? And I looked at her and I'm like, sure. And she goes, sure. And I'm like, sure. Yeah. What do you want me to do? You know, do backflips and be excited that you want to talk to me? The bottom line is she apologized to me. She apologized to me because she said Liz had told her all these things, tried to get her to testify against me. And she knew from who I was, my character, coaching their son in rugby, doing all this stuff. She refused to do it. She apologized to me. But then she also said, my kids and I watch your TikToks and we know what you're going through and we feel sorry for you. And your son and your kids are watching your TikToks. So to answer your question, they know what's going on, but they don't have a voice. They can't sit there when you're under a tyrant. You can't rebel against a tyrant when you're 13 years old. There's going to come a point in time where they get to the point where they're like, fuck this. And they're like, we want to see our dad. And I either wait on the court to do that or for them to do that. But they know what's going on. They know who they're living with. They know who that person is.